I'm Vinny Politan. We've got a busy Friday night here on Closing Arguments. Thanks so much for joining us. And what a trial that we are covering right now. Gavel-to-gavel coverage all day long in Kentucky. An airline pilot accused of triple murder. And today, the lead investigator took the stand. And that's usually a big moment for prosecutors, a very big moment. You know, you kind of put the whole case together for the jury and explain to them exactly all the things you did, the evidence you gathered, how you got it, and filling in the blanks. Also, today, the son of one of the victims took the stand. And he's important as well because he, along with his aunt, helped investigators gather up this important evidence against the defendant. And again, we've been saying this from the beginning. This is a case where prosecutors have talked a lot about motive. There's a lot of storylines going on, a lot of drama between the relationships of all the people involved here. The one thing that's a little thin for prosecutors, and this comes from a former prosecutor, is the actual evidence in the case. And today, the defense going after that evidence, going after the investigation, going after the lead investigator. Take a look.
In front of the grand jury, you testified under oath that there was cell phone evidence that put him in an incriminating location, didn't you?
I answered your question, yes, sir, I did.
But today, you know that that information, that testimony was incorrect.
That information come from a report that I'd received from the FBI on a not from the download, but from the telephone records from AT&T, placing the phone in the area off of the position of the cell phone records.
But today, you know that that information is incorrect.
Today, I know from new technology that's been developed, and the phone has since been downloaded, that the phone was not there, yes.
But that testimony you gave before was in front of the grand jury under oath.
It was prior to the information I have received now, yes.
And that isn't the only mistake that you made in this case, is it?
No, sir, I'm human. I do make mistakes.
In fact, you also, as you stated, collected arson evidence in this case.
Yes, sir, I did.
And that arson evidence could have been pivotal, couldn't it?
Sir, the arson evidence is not a requirement for a proof of arson.
It could have told us whether a flammable liquid, some chemical was used in that car fire, right?
It could have told us, but there was already flammable liquid there with it being a car, and the car operates off of gasoline.
More importantly, it could have told us what it was.
Possibly.
And that's why we have the crime lab, right?
We have them, yes, sir.
We have them so that they can help you figure out what happened.
Yes, sir.
So that prosecutors can know what to do, right?
Yes, sir.
And that they can come in here and tell the jury so the jury can figure out what the right verdict is in the case.
That is correct.
But in this case, you messed it up, didn't you?
I filled a container with more information, with more packaging than what it should have had to be able to breathe. Yes, sir.
Even though you've had some training on arson investigations, right?
Yes, sir, I have.
But because of that, we don't know what those results would have been.
No, sir, we do not.
And you know today that that testimony was incorrect.
Today, the only thing I know for certain is I know where his phone was.
And what you told the grand jury was wrong about the location of the phone.
What I told the grand jury was based upon the information that I had off the time, based off the phone records, not the phone itself. What I've learned since is off the phone itself, and I know the location of where the phone was at the time.
Can't you just admit you were wrong?
I've admitted I've been wrong about numerous things.
Why can't you admit that you were wrong about that?
Counsel.
Yes, Judge.
His answers are responsive. Either move on or sit down.
You got the outcome you wanted, didn't you?
Counsel.
That was my next question, Judge.
Move on or sit down.
I have no more questions for this witness.
Move on or sit down. That's interesting because it seemed, like the cross-examination was pretty effective, right? Attacking the weakness of the prosecution case. But then you always got to be careful. When you walk that line, do you go too far? Do you turn off the jury? Because at the end of the day, you want the jury to like you if you're one of the attorneys, right? And maybe they do like that. I don't know. Let's bring in Court TV legal correspondent Julia Janae. She's joining us live from Elizabethtown, Kentucky tonight. Julia, what do we think here now? We've got some sizzling cross-examination. There's parts of the prosecution case that are vulnerable, but then you've got the judge yelling at the defense attorney. So how did all that play today inside the courtroom?
I gotta tell you, it was out of character for Judge Adkins that we've seen him in this trial, and as far as what the jury has seen from him. He is so easygoing and so kind to these jurors especially, but to everyone in the courtroom, and he even has a great sense of humor. He's always telling a joke or two when the jurors come back. Today he had one about juror buttons and his grandkids. But this was a moment that really surprised me because we hadn't seen him get this stern with anyone in the courtroom. So this jury is likely not left with any kind of a bad impression of the defense or the judge in any way, because he then said, look, you all have had a long day, you've heard some interesting testimony, you get to go home early and then come back on Monday. But it did show that if you cross that line in Judge Atkins' courtroom, he is going to call you out.
Yeah, the one thing that I've learned through the years is that jurors bond with the judge. So sometimes if the judge, is saying someone's doing something wrong, then the jury's going to feed off that. But, we'll see. But the defense attorney has a job to do, right? So what's the takeaway from all of this? Is the takeaway that this was a botched investigation, or is the takeaway that, hey, they got a little something wrong, but the rest of this was on board?
It's hard to say how this is going to play with the jury because we knew, as far as us researching this case beforehand, that the cell phone data was going to be important because it was disputed by the defense. The defense actually filed a motion to dismiss the entire indictment because they had learned through their own expert that this cell phone data analysis was incorrect. It did not show that the defendant was not where he said he was with his wife at home or with his fiance at home, and that it did not show that his phone was moving along with the victim's phone, Pam Phillips, to his place of employment, which was Fort Campbell. So there were already these problems that the defense raised in the pretrial part of this case. And now we hear the opening statements from the prosecution, and I noticed it was missing. You didn't hear anything about cell phone data. I thought it was going to be cleared up. I thought there might be a battle of the experts where a prosecution expert would say, yes, this cell phone data is accurate, not what the defense is saying, but really they've backed off of this cell phone data and just focused on other key pieces of evidence, which would seem that they are then acquiescing to the fact that this was a faulty use of the cell phone data, and perhaps it may be data that will be used to support the defense when they start their case in chief.
Fascinating development, and it's all playing out in the courtroom. Like we said, this is a case where things are going to play out in the courtroom in a very unpredictable manner, and today was no exception. Now, the victim's son also testified today, and you feel so bad for this guy, and he had to talk about identifying his dad's face. Let's take a listen.
And they brought a picture of my dad from the nose up, and they said that he had some trauma, and that if this was okay enough to make an ID, that's what I would need to use. So I went upstairs and got a picture. My dad had very light eyebrows, like blonde eyebrows. And so I identified my dad by his eyebrows from the nose up, and I showed them a picture that was similar. That would have been the 24th.
You can see how much impact this has had on him. And it's obvious. I mean, both parents gone, murdered in this horrific way. And you never think about the other parts, right? Something like that. He's the one that's got to identify his dad. This is heartbreaking.
Identify him and then not even know how to identify his mother because she was so badly burned. The remains that were left in that car where she was left behind were unidentifiable. They had to use DNA to eventually determine who she was. That was one of the other hard parts of his testimony today when he testified that his mother's remains weren't confirmed until over a month later on December 23rd. 2 days before Christmas is when he got the notification that she was in fact the person inside. He said his family was in limbo. He also had poignant testimony about what he did immediately after learning about his parents' death, that he was told by a friend who still lived in his hometown that there was crime scene tape around his parents' home. And when he did find out about it through reading this news article, he then immediately drove to Michigan to see his grandparents to make sure he could be there in person to tell them so they didn't find out the way he did. They were in the courtroom today. And after that testimony, Matt Phillips was able to join his family there in the gallery.
And again, you know, that's the part sometimes you don't realize in these murder trials, right? You've got victims and they've got to tell other family members about what happened, and you've got to identify bodies. It is tough. It is brutal. In this case, it goes one step further because the family's not just testifying. The son's not just testifying because, okay, you're going to humanize the victims and let the jury know who they were. He's also an important fact witness to all of this as someone who found evidence in the case, some of the linchpin evidence along with his aunt. So let's take a listen to a little bit of the cross-examination of, again, the victim's son who had found this evidence.
You did everything in your power to try and make an arrest occur in this case.
I did everything that I could do as the only son of 2 murdered victims to make sure that folks were applying their resources to our case. Absolutely right.
But you did more than that. You also provided this piece of evidence, which has been entered and marked as exhibit number 1 to the police, right? Mm-hmm. And you provided some discs marked top secret, right?
That were used in a court-martial proceeding. That's
correct.
That is correct.
And you provided a .22 projectile, right?
That
Correct.
Linda Durham found, and we made sure that the authorities were aware of and made sure that they processed. That is correct.
And you provided a .45 shell casing.
We brought the police and alerted them of a piece of evidence and had them collect it. That is correct.
So you agree that you provided these 4 pieces of evidence, right?
We alerted authorities to process evidence, yes.
And now someone's been arrested.
That is correct.
This is very, very unusual, Julia. Extremely unusual. He's in a tough spot. On the one hand, for prosecutors, this is a witness who is, you know, if you believe everything he's saying, and you know, no reason for prosecutors not to believe him. He's providing evidence by just coming across things and then calling police and say, look, what we found here. But on the other hand, it makes investigators look really bad that they missed all of this evidence. That you've got a triple murder and you're missing pieces of evidence. So it's a double-edged sword for prosecutors here. And then, you know, John Matthew Phillips, the son, is in the middle of all of this. So how important is the evidence that he found as opposed to the evidence found by the actual investigators in the case?
Well, the actual investigators did find the main information, right? They found the bodies in the car. They found the body of Calvin Phillips in his home. We learned today from the investigator on the stand, Scott Smith, that they used a type of luminol, blue star, to try and figure out where these crimes happened. They had some pictures of what looked like blood in various places, the kitchen, and it seemed like around the foyer as well. But ultimately, aside from some fragments of projectiles and a tooth that they found under a cellar, it didn't sound like there was a lot of uncovered evidence that would help this jury understand how that connects to the defendant. Really, they didn't find anything that pointed to a suspect. What we learned today from the testimony of Matt Phillips is that it was in fact 4 pieces of evidence that he turned over to authorities. We've been talking a lot about the dog tag that was found a couple of weeks after the murders of the defendant that was inside the home, and also the shell casing that was found 5 months later that connected to the defendant because it was the same shell casing as the .45 Glock that he owned. But also there was a disc that said top secret on it that was turned over in January, I believe, that was found in Joan Harmon's home. That was actually one that Calvin and Pamela Phillips had helped her get. So Matt Phillips was the one who was cleaning out that house, found that disc, the top secret disc that had information about the subpoena and about the court martial that his father was involved in with the defendant. So he turned that over, and there was a projectile, Vinny, that was found by a neighbor who was helping Matt Phillips clean out his parents' home. She was sweeping and found a projectile that was turned over to the investigators as well. That was early on, a couple weeks after the murders.
Unbelievable case. Continues on Monday. Get some rest this weekend. Julie Janae in Kentucky, thanks so much.